So thanks so much for joining us today for the live stream to discuss the new Southern Concourse at Redfern Station. I'm Julie Songquist and I'm the Director of Eastern Harbour City within the Community and Place branch at Transport for New South Wales. Before we kick off today, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting. And for me, I'm on the land of the Gamaragal of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal people and elders who may be joining us today. Also, before we go on, I'd just like to let everybody know that we're recording today's session and we'll be posting the session online for people who may not have been able to make it, or if you wanted to view the session again. So just as a bit of background, Transport New South Wales consulted on 4 design options for a new concourse at Redfern Station. We're very thankful to those people who responded during that process and took the time to provide us with their feedback, including those from the community who proposed alternative designs. That consultation process really helped us to understand what most of the customers and community members want from the new concourse. And in November last year, we announced the preferred design, which will link platforms 1 to 10 to new station entrances on Marion Street and Little Everleigh Street. We appreciate that a number of local residents have concerns about aspects of this design, as well as the plans for the development of the area, and we'll be working with those residents as part of this process. So over the last 6 months, we've been preparing the Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS as it's known, which is currently on public exhibition. So the EIS outlines the proposed project scope, as well as the potential impacts and benefits of this project, both during construction and operation. The EIS also includes information on how potential impacts will be managed. And today we'll be providing you with an overview of the scope covered in this EIS and also some information on how you can make your submission to the Department of Planning. We'll be joined today by Claire Sowden, who's our Project Director for Redfern North Everleigh, who will briefly give you an overview of how the station upgrade fits into the wider plans for the precinct. And then Michael Childs, our Senior Project Manager, will talk about the concourse design. We've also got some subject matter experts online from the Environment and Planning team, from the project team. They're on hand to help answer any of the questions that you may have. So just about questions, how to submit your questions. They can be submitted at any time during today's presentation by clicking on the comments box with the question mark and then click on the Ask a Question button. Don't forget to hit send button, and you can like other attendees' questions too if you see some there that you're interested in. And so we'll aim to get through as many of your questions as possible. I'll try and group the questions, similar questions together so that they can be answered at once, and we'll publish any questions that we don't get to today on our project website. So now I'll hand over to Claire and she'll give you a quick update about the broader precinct. So thanks, Claire.
Excellent. Thanks, Julie, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, we can't be together in person today, but we do look forward to a time post-coronavirus when we can meet face to face. So we're really excited to meet with you today to discuss the first step in the Redfern North Everleigh precinct, the new Southern Concourse at Redfern train station. As you well know, the new Southern Concourse is a long-awaited piece of infrastructure for Redfern, and it will provide a multitude of benefits for the community. It's going to provide easier access and more access to jobs at ATP, for example, and better access to education at the University of Sydney. We've heard from you over the last 12 months as we've gone through this process of developing up the design for the new Southern Concourse, or the bridge at Redfern as we call it sometimes. And we've heard from you that you wanted also access to the ESR platforms 11 and 12 at Redfern train station. We wanted to let you know today that we're undertaking a series of investigation works looking at that opportunity, and that we've engaged an architect and an engineer to help us understand the complexities of building the access to those platforms, and also at divesting some land, which is currently just a car park on grade at the station, in order to fund the access down to those platforms. So we're still doing those works, and we don't have anything kind of conclusive to say yet, just to let you know that we're progressing. And as soon as we've got more to say, we certainly will we'll let you know. Over the coming few months, we do look forward to engaging with you more on the future of North Everleigh and the broader precinct, and we will be coming back with more communication around how you can get involved in the bigger renewal process around the North Everleigh site. The process of renewing the broader Redfern North Everleigh precinct will take into account many things that have already been done by both the government and also inputs that we've heard from the community over the many years that site's been looked at. So just to let you know that we will be consulting with you further later this year, and that we will be looking at recent strategies that government have put forward in relation to things like the Sydney Innovation and Technology Precinct. Today we really want to focus this session on the EIS and on the station. There's a lot to talk about, obviously, and I'm sure you've got a lot of questions. So to provide you with more detail on the EIS and the upgrade to the Redfern train station, I'd like to introduce you to Michael Childs, who's our Senior Project Manager for the Transport Access Program. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So what we would like to do is really go through what where we're up to on the new Southern Concourse. We're back here again, the team is here, and we've been coming out regularly to the community and forums over the last 12 months to make sure that we have the right answer. And what we like to do every time we come to the community is that we're showing and demonstrating progress. And the very important milestone at this point is that we have the EIS lodged with DPI, which is a critical point in the development of this project. So just to confirm, this project announced by government, fully funded by government, and now the EIS is submitted into DPI for us to then move through to that construction phase. So very exciting news for this long-awaited project. Just wanted to recap the consultation from last year in 2019, just to refresh everyone of the thorough work and a lot of the helpful community consultation process we went through. Back in July, August, there was 400 responses received against the 4 options that Transport had developed as the opportunities for providing that new Southern Concourse. Out of that selected option, the options that were proposed, there was a preferred that was selected at the end of that process. Now, from that process included a fairly robust multi-criteria analysis process where safety, connectivity, wayfinding, urban design, heritage aspects, and obviously cost was all balanced together to ensure that Transport was delivering the right option for the community and the railway station going into the future. We would acknowledge that there was 2 community options that were proposed during this consultation process. One was an option 5 that was developed by Reconnect Redfern, and another one which was the H design, or which was option 6 as part of our consultation or the EIS documentation. So both of these options were thoroughly assessed in line with the 4 options that Transport had put forward, and again, on balance, weighing up all those different aspects that I mentioned before in terms of that security, urban design, heritage, cost, etc. On balance, the recommended or the preferred option out of that fairly detailed process was the option that connected the bridge direct from Little Everleigh Street across to Marion Street. There were a range of issues with the 2 community options, particularly around some constructability, fairly significant constructability concerns, some wayfinding difficulties in terms of location and how that bridge actually related to the station platforms and then also the surrounding environment. The bulk and scale of some of the bridge structures were much larger and had a bigger impact upon the heritage precinct, and a range of fundamental issues that really didn't lead it to be, or either of those options to be, the preferred. So we might just step on to the preferred option just to go through what that actually includes in terms of scope and configuration. So what you see here is the image taken straight from the EIS in terms of what has been lodged with DPI for the scope that is submitted for approval. This layout is almost identical to what was proposed back in November. And what we actually have here in terms of the scope of works, and I'll just step through the colour coding in terms of the works that we're producing, is the yellow section in the centre is the bridge. So this is a 6 metre wide concourse, clear width, that provides lift and stair access to all of the above ground platforms 1 to 10. We then have the entrances from that bridge into Marion Street, which is the green section you see there, which is a new station entry, which interfaces with Marion Street. And then we have the red area, which is at the western side of the bridge, which is the Little Everleigh Street brand new station entry as well. That entry is repurposing the existing local heritage building at 125, 127 Little Everleigh Street. So the bulk of that building is being kept and is being repurposed into a station entry. So once we actually get from platforms, which provides that additional stair access, that additional capacity requirements, provides that DDA access lift, we get up to the 6 metre wide concourse, and then we have a very direct route out to the station entries. We then needed to look at what are we going to do in the surrounding streets? How are we going to ensure that the throughput and the destination orientation actually works in these streets? So the blue areas you see there is what is designated as shared zones. So the shared zones, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes in terms of priority to pedestrians and cyclists. So there is shared zones in both Little Everleigh Street and Marion Street. Marion Street has an existing shared zone partially, and we will extend that. With Little Everleigh Street in that shared zone configuration, we're looking at relocating the 20 car spaces that are located on the street currently to a car park located towards the end of the street opposite Ivy Lane. And that car park will be located on transport lands. There's a few ancillary works around the outside to further assist that journey from surrounding streets in and out of the station. Ivy Street has a footpath extension to ensure that there's footpath capacity at that point back to Abercrombie Street. We are looking at a kiss and ride and the bus stop located on Lawson Street, and a few works over on Gibbon Street close to the bus interchange. So this is a scheme provides that full access from platforms out into the surrounding streets. We'll step on to the next slide, which is just some artist impressions, just to give everyone, I guess, the flavour of the type of design details that has been produced for this bridge. These are subject to detailed design, but these are the preliminary urban design context that has been put together for this bridge and is part of the EIS submission. The one on the left there is the platform 4-5 view. So you're looking from platform 4-5, looking towards the north at the backside of the bridge, and you can see the ranges of lifts and structures crossing across the corridor. The one on the right there is an internal view of the bridge, really indicating that 6 metre wide clear width, which not just caters for current patronage, which is up to 70,000 journeys per day, but heading towards 2036, where that gets up to 100,000 journeys, and this 6 metre wide bridge enables for 2036 and well beyond in terms of capacity. We might just look at the shared zones, just so everyone is familiar with what a shared zone is and how it operates. So we just got a few artist impressions there again. The top left is the Marion Street shared zone, the view taken from right at the end of Rose Hill Street, looking across Marion Street towards the new station entry. And the bottom image there is Little Everleigh Street, looking towards that repurposed heritage building, which becomes the new station entry. So just to recap what a shared zone is. So the normal streets will be either a 40 or 50k speed limit, and cars would have the priority. In this case, in a shared zone, the speed limit gets reduced to 10 kilometres per hour, and that's for bikes and vehicles. And priority is given in these local shared zone areas to the vehicles and cyclists. Cars have to navigate around the priority of vehicles and cyclists. So they're generally put in where you have high pedestrian volumes, or you want to really focus on the safety and the interface of the pedestrians and cyclists, and the cars become a secondary access mode. Now, we obviously recognise that these streets have residential properties and unit complexes on them. So a shared zone still allows for that access to driveways and garages. You can still enter a shared zone. Service vehicles can still get into those areas. Street parking in both these zones will be either relocated in Little Everleigh Street, or some of the street parking in Marion Street is actually removed. And going forward, because we recognise that these shared zones really lead into the community interface, it's where these properties interface with the road, that we will and have committed to doing a co-design process, and that is with local residents, Sydney City Council, who are fully on board in terms of going through this process with the resident groups, New South Wales Police, and a range of other key stakeholders to really look at refining those co-design processes within those shared zones. So what is the look and feel of those shared zones? What are the issues or concerns with the local residents in terms of the look and feel of these streets? How can we get the best design that means that it provides that access to the station, provides that pedestrian flow in a safe and economic manner, but it also caters for the resident requirements and make sure that we get a really sympathetic design that works for all. We might just kick back to Julie here in terms of going through the environmental impact statement submissions process itself.
Thanks, Michael. So, as I mentioned at the start of the session, the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, known as DPI, they currently have the EIS on public exhibition, and submissions are invited until the 24th of June. So on their planning portal, details are listed on the screen that you're looking at now. You'll find a number of detailed reports on the project's potential impacts and how they'll be managed. The link also provides information about how to make a submission, and I'd encourage everyone to please go in there and have your say on the project. You can also find a lot of information about the project on the Transport for New South Wales website, as well as a link to DPI's portal on there. So if you have any questions or you'd like clarification or further information on any element of the project, please contact our team by calling or emailing with the details there. We're more than happy to help and answer your questions. But I should stress that the only way to make a formal submission on the environmental impact statement, or the EIS, is via Planning's portal link, not through Transport for New South Wales. So I just need to make that one clear. So again, if you need any clarity on the process, what to do, or any further information, our team at Transport is here to help answer any of your questions, so don't hesitate to get in touch with us. So now I'll move on to the questions that I see. We have a number of questions that are being asked. I'll start with the most liked, popular ones first. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'll try and group the questions together if there are similar ones, so that we're not jumping around between speakers. And it's looking from the questions that I'm seeing now that there's probably quite a few that Michael's probably best person to respond to. So I'll just kick off with the first question, Michael, from James. It's about a bike route. Will a bike route be allowed via the Southern Concourse, given it connects to the Wilson Street cycleway and provides access to the inner south area?
Yeah, thanks, Jill. So as far as the bike route is concerned, we really work very closely with council and even our own state government in terms of how this bicycle route that comes out of Wilson Street and obviously connects over past Gibbon into Regent Street, what is the best path for that to take? We obviously have a few modes of access that's required through this zone. The station bridge itself, as I've mentioned, is up to 100,000 pedestrians per day in a very busy peak hour zone. And we needed to make sure that we catered for primarily that pedestrian access. And while cyclists could dismount and wheel their bikes across the bridge, there has been a dedicated cycle lane that has been constructed or is under construction on Lawson Street. That actually provides that dedicated cycleway access across the corridor, which is only around 80 to 100 metres from the new Southern Concourse bridge and connects into existing cycleways. So it was deemed as most appropriate to use the existing Lawson Street bridge as the dedicated cycleway, while focusing the pedestrian access to the new Southern Concourse. But just me reconfirm is that that doesn't prevent cyclists from wheeling across the bridge if they wanted to take that particular cut across. There are some steps at the Marion Street end, so you would either have to carry your bike down the stairs or catch the lift at the platform 10 side if you wanted to cross the bridge.
Thanks, Michael. Next question is from somebody has a question about the shelters on the platforms. They're an alumni of the Sydney University. They know how many people can crowd onto the platforms. If there's no overhead shelter, they won't be moving along the open platforms in the wet or hot weather. Is there any plans to change the shelters and extend them?
So the platforms that currently have some platform canopies are platforms 2 to 9. So there are from the existing stairs on those platforms, which are the highly used platforms, currently have canopies from the base of stairs through to approximately 60% of the platforms. From the new Southern Concourse, we are then going to be adding on a range of canopies that probably extend the length of those canopies by another 25%. So the platform canopy coverage, roughly for the 8 major platforms that are used in terms of interchanging and access to Redfern, will have approximately 70% of platform coverage, which should provide plenty of weather protection and sun exposure protection for a majority of customers using this station going forward.
Okay, next question is about the community design. Karen's asking if we'll be releasing the evaluation of the alternative design submitted by the community group Redfern Connect to the public.
So as I'd mentioned, there was quite a thorough, I guess, internal design process that went through with our experts in various fields to review both those community options. The consultation report that has been published, plus the EIS, does have sections on each of the options that we had developed and the pros and cons, etc. At this point, it's not proposed to release the detailed technical analysis, but that's something that we could take upon advisement and discuss further with Reconnect and Redwatch of whether that is a possibility.
The next question is about the link between the two sides. Is there an unpaid link between the two sides of the corridor, as it looks like an opportunity to improve community connectivity for all residents has been missed?
So this is an issue of that's been heard very clearly from local council, local members, and the community council that can transport have this as an ungated or a free access bridge. So we've taken that on board, and we've been doing a lot of assessments in terms of whether we should have the ticket gates or whether it should be a tap-on, tap-off bollards. Being the 6th busiest station in the network, this station would be generally a gated station for a range of reasons because of the patronage numbers. Some of that is revenue protection, which obviously provides revenue back in to run the railways, security issues, and a range of other items that police have raised also. But that in mind, we are obviously having a look at the assessments of how the revenue protection, the security, the design aspects actually weigh up against that open access across the bridge. So a decision on that hasn't been made at this point. I would note that the EIS has the gates in there, mainly because we need a certain size of entry. We obviously need weather protection for those gates, so we wanted to make sure that we designed for the gates in the system, although those gates may or may not be going in, still subject to further detailed assessments, particularly with Greater Sydney and Sydney Trains as the operator. We are looking at what emerging technologies also exist in this space to see whether there is any opportunity to have gates or not. I would caveat all this that even if gates do go in, is that the Opal card system does allow for tap on and tap off across the concourse at no cost, and that could be through credit card, it can be through Opal card, any of the smartwatch functions that can link those. You don't pay if you tap through the bridge. So that function will exist regardless of where we end up, but I guess watch this space. We are working through what the final configuration will look like.
Thanks, Michael. Just one addition to that, I think, from the bridge is whether people can ride their bikes over the bridge.
So as far as riding bikes over the bridge, I guess as I indicated before, there are a set of stairs on the Marion Street side. Just the level differences between the Levelly Street and Marion are not dead flat. And because of the level of commuters and pedestrians that will be using the bridge, it will be strongly encouraged that cyclists dismount as they enter either end of the concourse and then wheel their bikes across the bridge and then rejoin their journey once they get back onto the surrounding footpaths or roads.
Thank you. Michael, what will happen to the big issue during construction?
So we've been working collaboratively with Big Issue for about 18 months to ensure that they are suitably looked after in terms of relocations, etc. So we are currently working with Big Issue for a relocation before the end of the year to a suitable premise that will allow them to continue to trade. And then Transport and New South Wales Government is looking at opportunities for either a permanent position or even coming back to the residual floor area of the 125, 127 Little Levelly Street building that they're currently in. There are some residual floor areas that aren't required for the station area, and we're looking at whether that is an appropriate location for Big Issue to be rehoused. So we are working collaboratively with Big Issue to ensure that they are looked after and that they do have a place to operate out of.
The next question is about the opportunity to incorporate Indigenous artwork or themes into the design, given the heritage of the area. In response to that, the answer is that we'll be starting some engagement with the Aboriginal community and stakeholders very shortly to identify ways that we can incorporate some of the heritage and culture into the design of the project. So that's definitely something that we'll be considering as part of it. The next question is from Michael of ERCO. So 6 metres, Michael, does not seem very wide in the context of a very, very busy station in light of the pandemic, in which people are being encouraged to build for the future where there is plenty of pedestrian space. Has Transport for New South Wales considered a wider width in light of what we know now from COVID? Obviously, COVID is a very recent phenomenon. That needs to be contemplated going forward. I might just step back to pre-COVID in terms of how the bridge has been developed. The existing Northern Concourse will be retained as an access to the station, and it's clearly under capacity for not just current but future. Once the new Southern Concourse goes in, all the modelling and the destination assessments indicate that basically all the pedestrians will basically split 50-50 each side. So 50% will continue to use the Northern Concourse, 50% will then be using the Southern Concourse. So the Northern Concourse will still retain 50% of patronage. So this 6 metre concourse really needs to take that 50% width. Some of the challenges at this site and some of the challenges with all the options was the very narrow site that the platforms exist on. They taper down to almost nothing at the southern end, and we have to get lifts and stairs to take that 50% patronage. So the bridge really can't exist any further south along the platforms and have any opportunity to access the platforms as the station exists. And then that also puts a very limited width on the bridge in terms of how wide it can be before you can't fit those lifts and stairs. Regardless of those construction constraints, we have done a lot of very detailed pedestrian modelling to determine what the width of bridge should be. And 6 metres is a width of bridge that provides up to 2036 and well beyond sufficient capacity for that 50% of the station, allowing for that future development through South Everleigh, the North Everleigh development, the increase in the university capacity and carriage works, RPA additional, the metro works that are coming through. So all those additional requirements over the next 20 odd years have been factored in and has determined that the 6 metre wide bridge in the configuration we have put it in with lifts and stairs opposite, which really restricts or minimises those cross flows, that the bridge works very well
for the medium to long term for this particular location. So 6 metres at the moment is the width. We'll take your point on the COVID side and see whether that would change anything. I would think unlikely at this point regarding long-term assets that Transport's building.
Michael, what is going to happen with the lost parking spaces?
So if we look at the Little Everleigh Street side, those 20 car spaces, which consists of 18 standard spaces, 1 disabled and 1 car share, they do have the 2-hour parking limit except for local residents that obviously can park there all day. The 20 spaces from that street are being relocated over into the land on Sydney Trains or Transport's land, and those 20 car spaces will be put back in that area. They will be signed the same, 2-hour parking, disabled spot, a car share and 18 standard spaces. So they will exist and operate how they do at the moment. So they're not for residents only. They are, as the current street parking exists, just moved to the end of the street. If we move over to Marion Street side, there are a range of all-day parking and some 2-hour parking in the Marion Street area, and those particular spaces, which is about a dozen spaces in that area and just on the corner of Rose Hill, will be removed from the parking in that area. The Water Tower building and the surrounding unit complexes behind already have parking within their buildings, so these are really seen as people coming into the area to park locally or to park all day for the station, which is not really something that we're encouraging at this very busy location. So there will be a range of street parking which is nominated in the EIS that will be removed permanently from the Marion Street side.
A question about access to Marion Street entrance. Will this be maintained during construction, noting the increased patronage expected at the Everleigh business side?
Yes, so we have worked very closely with CBA and Mirvac and Sydney Trains to look at maintaining that access off platform 10. For those that maybe aren't familiar with how the station operates, is a majority of people wanting to access South Everleigh come off the Northern Concourse and up and down the stairs on platform 10 as a more direct path to provide access to Marion Street and into the South Everleigh site. So those stairs, platform 10, will be maintained, except for irregular weekend close downs when the station or the platforms will be closed. But outside of those more localised closures, for a vast majority of the time, that platform 10 access will continue to provide access from the Northern Concourse down platform 10 and into South Everleigh as the numbers increase.
Next question is about bus stops. Is there any consideration to improving the bus stops on Gibbon Street as part of this project? There is little cover when it rains at these stops.
So the bus stops on Gibbon Street, it's well recognised that the bus interchange of Gibbon Street does not relate or very well to the station environment at this point. Obviously the bridge on platform 1 to 10 is moving a lot of the journeys to the southern side. And as Claire indicated earlier regarding the platform 11 and 12 access, is that access with the vacant land that Transport owns plus the bus interchange are all related into a proposal or an investigation that Transport's currently looking at, which would really resolve that bus laydown, the interface with the platform 11 and 12 and up to the concourse that is proposed here, plus the local development. So as part of the current EIS, it is not proposed to upgrade the bus interchange, but it is part of a pending development proposal that we're putting through. And as Claire said, later this year, there will be some more dialogue with the community in terms of what that will be.
Michael, will there be more secure bicycle parking? It's currently impossible to ride to Redfern Station and get the train to work because the current parking fills up very quickly and isn't very safe. It's a good opportunity to build excess cycle parking capacity and encourage more people to get on their bikes to get to work.
So in terms of the cycle parking, it's obviously recognised that additional cycle parking is warranted, particularly with the upgrade to the station. So the cycle parking will currently consist of open racks. There's about 20 additional spaces on Little Everly Street, which is in addition to the 34 that already exist. So there'll be 60 of total on Little Everly Street in the shared zone environment, and there'll be an additional 20 in the Marion Street interface. Currently they are proposed to be the open rack type. Obviously the shed type, such as installed up at the Gibbon or Lawson Street entry, actually takes up quite a bit of space in terms of fitting them into this very constrained environment. So we've put in maximum amount of cycle parking that works in these constrained areas to really maximise that number of spaces at the station.
So with 125 Little Everly Street, which is the Big Issue building, now incorporated into the station entrance, what else will that building be used for? Is there an opportunity for retail?
So as I've mentioned previously, there are some residual floor areas. It's a 3-floor building at the moment, and approximately 60% of the building is required for the new station entry, and then the residual floor area is yet to be determined its use. So some of those use opportunities, as I mentioned, is for Big Issue to possibly come back into that building to operate out of if it is appropriate and works. If that doesn't occur, then it is clearly a retail opportunity in that area. So the residual floor areas will be filled by some form of business post project completion.
So the next question is about the Little Everly Street residents and the impact that the project may have, and from the increase to footpath traffic, impact to the use of cars on street parking. What compensation and considerations have been made for them? And I'm happy to talk to that one. We are going to shortly be undertaking a co-design process with the residents of Little Everly Street and Marion Street to consider some of these issues and to work through them with them, and to ensure that we address. We know that there's a number of concerns around this, and we will be working with these residents over the coming months to address the issues that that we foresee for the project. So the next question is about car parking again, from Jamie. So will there be access to the car parking spaces added with a walkway on the track side of the houses to allow more direct access?
So for the car parking, which is really the offset car parking for the displaced parking off Little Everly Street. Little Everly Street is a closed loop street, which is basically Little Everly into Ivy Lane and back out to Lawson. So it's seen that this parking is really in that same closed loop. It doesn't provide Wilson Street driver access into this car parking. You can only access it from Little Everly Street. It is the 20 spaces that are being replaced as street parking. It is not deemed or meant to be for commuter parking in any fashion. So really the access will be maintained from that Little Everly Street interface into that parking as a replacement. Any access in the future from, I guess, the track side is within that broader North Everly development area, which Claire touched upon earlier, is currently under a development assessment.
Just lost the questions. There we go. So will bikes still be able to travel along Little Everly Street after the upgrade?
Yes, so bikes within a shared zone have priority along with pedestrians, as I mentioned. Behind cars are well behind pedestrians and cyclists. We obviously recognise that the dedicated Wilson Street bicycle path terminates at the end of Little Everly Street, and then there's the dedicated path that is at the other end out of Lawson Street. So part of this co-design process is ensuring that we get that right mix of cyclist suitability in terms of road surfaces and finishes and directions, along with the pedestrian access, plus allowing for those cars from the local residents and deliveries, etc., to occur. So yes, absolutely, cyclists will be able to still come through this zone, but it will be at a 10k reduced speed limit because it is a shared zone. This
isn't necessarily in the project scope or purse, and I'm not sure if you're able to answer this one, Michael, but what is being done to increase walking and cycling connectivity further west of Redfern, between Redfern and McDonaldtown? For example, an overpass around Carriageworks somewhere, perhaps.
So further cross-corridor connectivity, and I guess connecting those bike corridors more to the south of the job. You're right, hasn't been part of what this project is under stage 1 of the broader North Everleigh and Redfern upgrade. So this is stage 1, and obviously stage 2 and 3 or subsequent stages is probably that more broader context of how bicycle paths, how the development growth will occur, what is the access paths either across the corridor or along the corridor. So at this stage, that is part of, I guess, the subsequent precinct, which I guess Transport has committed to towards the end of the year, coming out to start to talk to the community where these type of questions need to be raised at that point.
So next question from Marie is, why has platform 10 been closed recently for works if this project is still at EIS stage, i.e. hasn't been approved yet?
So there are a few works that actually occurred last weekend and a few more that are occurring this weekend on the platforms, which are investigation works in preparation for the approval of the project. So the type of investigation works is determining where services are located in those platforms, and some service route work. So they are relatively minor works that Transport's doing in preparation for. They are not works that are subject to the EIS approval. So the main bulk of the works, the big works, will occur post the EIS approval, which is towards the end of the year, but you will see a range of more minor works occurring in or around the station in preparation for that approval.
So the next question from Karen is, of the consultation responses, how many of those were lodged by local residents and how many of the responses were lodged by commuters? So in response to that, we didn't actually ask people in what capacity they were responding. We asked for a suburb, which wasn't always provided by people, but we're happy to take that question on notice and see if we can dig down deeper into the data and try and get better clarity on that answer for you. The next question is about a DA has just been approved for an apartment block on the corner of Margaret and Cornwallis. If the construction starts on this at the same time, is it going to be a nightmare for local residents, and how will this be managed?
So as part of the EIS project process, we need to look at the cumulative impact of other projects that are pending or ongoing. I would have to seek some clarification from our planners in terms of what projects have been included within our EIS, but clearly projects occurring in the same vicinity need to ensure that whether that's road access, whether that's closures or disruptions, or whether it's even added noise, vibration, light spill, all needs to be contemplated as a group of projects together. So I guess what we can confirm is that we'll definitely be working with any other developers in the local area that are building concurrently with us to make sure that the cumulative impact is reviewed upon the impact on local residents to minimise that wherever feasible and reasonable.
Michael, what will be done to minimise noise around the Foundry building surrounded by Ivy Street, Ivy Lane and Little Everleigh Street?
So that question could relate to all of the local residents, both on the Marion and the Little Everleigh Street side. Clearly, there will be some major construction works associated with this bridge. It is heavy engineering work and obviously comes with some level of disruption. Things that we will be looking at in terms of can we maximise high noise activities during the daytime hours, limit them from the night. What type of machinery and plant can we get away with? Looking at reverse beepers, looking at noise insulation around noisy activities, hours of work, respite from noisy works, etc. There are a range of mitigations that have been contemplated in the EIS, and then even more so during the assessment of each and every activity that we're doing, what is reasonable and feasible to diminish those impacts to as much as possible to the surrounding residents, including the Foundry.
The next one's from Derek Huxley. It's quite a long question, so bear with me, Michael. Have you properly considered the space for road traffic when bollards have been installed for foot traffic at the corner of Cornwallis Street and Marion Street? By the inclusion of bollards, note pedestrians will simply ignore the bollards and walk on the road as they do now. And the fact this distance is only 5.33 metres at its narrowest from the fence to curb, this leaves a width of only 3.3 metres for road traffic, including delivery trucks and other large vehicles, to navigate a 90-degree corner if you allow for 2 metre width of pedestrian-only space. This would be a hindrance on our business, which operates in the Water Tower building on Marion Street.
So that particular location that you described there is where a majority of pedestrians come from the station around the corner of Marion and Cornwallis to enter the South Everleigh Street side. We obviously recognise there is some issues in terms of clearances, visibility and safety around that particular zone, hence why we're looking at extending the shared zone that's currently installed on the corner to increase that to include more of Marion Street. And it'll be very similar in terms of what we're doing over to Little Everleigh Street. It is about discouraging cars as much as possible, unless those cars need to come into that area, such as residents, deliveries, garbage trucks, all of those can still come in, but trying to discourage your general drivers that are coming in to look for a car parking spot or etc. So it's about making it safe for the pedestrians and cyclists and limiting that car access through that zone. So there are a range of treatments that we will be looking at, one that we're developing ourselves, and plus during that co-design process that I mentioned, that will exist for both Little Everleigh Street and Marion, to address a range of these issues with the local community to get that best solution.
Michael, will 24-hour access be available over the new bridge once operational, or will it be closed between certain times?
So the station currently operates that there is around a 3-hour block in the middle of the night, from around 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock roughly, where the current Northern Concourse is closed. So there is a possibility that closure, which is basically when there's no trains running, there is no station operations occurring, that the bridge may be closed at the same time. Some of this is depending upon whether the bridge is a gated or an ungated bridge, as we discussed previously, is still up for discussion and assessment. So the station is basically open for 21 hours currently. It wouldn't be no less than that. So the bridge, Southern Concourse, would be open for those 21 hours. It's just whether those few small hours in the middle of the night are closed for cleaning purposes and other station make good that they need to do every night to prepare for the next day.
Michael, will the new car parking space also be accessible from Wilson Street?
No, the 20 car spots, as I mentioned, are a direct offset from the Little Everleigh Street parking from that closed loop street circuit. So it is not proposed to open up the closed section of Wilson Street that links through to Little Everleigh Street to create access into the parking and the very constrained Ivy Lane, which is the only way out of there, which has to then turn into Lawson Street. So no, it is proposed to really relocate those cars into the same closed loop system that exists currently.
There's a couple of questions about Marion Street. How many stairs are there? Can we see them? And will this impact on wheelchairs?
So the number of steps at the Marion Street side is in around 10 odd stairs. It's about 1.5 meters from the Marion Street entrance level up to the bridge, and it's level access into the Little Everleigh Street. So there's no stairs or anything on the Little Everleigh Street side. However, there is a lift on the Marion Street side that provides access from platform 10 up to street and then up to bridge. So you can catch the lift, which will provide access from street to bridge or platform 10, or you can negotiate those 10 odd steps which come up from the street to the bridge.
Great, thanks. There's also a couple of questions about access down Little Everleigh Street. Will bikes still be able to go down Little Everleigh Street? Maybe you can just talk a little bit about access down Little Everleigh Street, both during construction and operation.
So if we tackle the operation side, so as I mentioned, it's a shared zone. Full access is provided through Little Everly Street under a 10k speed limit for cyclists, and that will link between the two cycle lanes, both at Lawson Street and Wilson. During construction, however, there is a single direction cycle lane as a contraflow that's in that street at the moment. And obviously we will be doing some significant upgrades to all pavement finishes, garden beds, some curb works, etc., signage and lighting through those zones that we'll be working, I guess, with the local residents in terms of how we actually stage that closure. There may and likely will be some temporary closures for short periods, and there may be some diversion of the cyclists during those periods as well. So in terms of that construction, that'll be part of our assessments, the notifications that go out to the community and local signage to give adequate notice and warning of any changes in that local street environment during construction.
Will there be any shops on the Southern Concourse?
So it's not proposed to be any retail shops on the Southern Concourse itself. It is about that pedestrian journey and access to the station and to the surrounding areas. So we are keeping the bridge free of clutter to provide that really very clean access to and fro. We did mention there is some opportunity within the building on Little Everly Street. And we are looking at obviously items such as vending machines and some other items, but retail opportunities will be limited through the new Southern Concourse space.
Why was there no bridge added for people to cross the railway without going through the paid area? There used to be one that went behind the buildings on Little Everly Street and went to the corner of Wilson Street.
So the previous old bridge that used to exist about 20 metres off the southern end of the platforms was I guess an industrial worker bridge. It was established for carriage works across to South Everly or ATP. That bridge was obviously a very old bridge that was in there back in the 50s and could never provide access from a bridge alignment off that southern end to the platforms for lift and stair access. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the bridge needed to be in approximately the location it's shown in this current upgrade to provide that adequate stair and lift access. I guess the second part of that question is why wasn't there a separate access that was free to access across the corridor? Obviously, we've looked at what the Lawson Street Bridge can provide in terms of cross-corridor access, what this bridge also provides to supplement. And then it comes down to whether this will be a gated or ungated station. But regardless, as I mentioned, the Opal cards can tap through at no cost. So anyone that has any of those forms of ticketing systems can use the bridge to cross the corridor.
Thanks, Michael. I think the next one I'll throw to Claire. It's a bit more of a precinct question. Can you confirm that there are plans for a high-rise development in the footprint of the current car park at the end of Marion Street? The space is outside opposite the Water Tower building entrance above platforms 11 and 12. Sorry, I think Claire's on mute.
There we go. Apologies, everyone. So yes, thank you for that question. I think that refers to what we said earlier in terms of the access to the ESR platforms 11 and 12 and what we told the community in consultation last year we would do in terms of access to those platforms. The access is currently unfunded and it's not part of the bridge project, and we said that we would look at the development of that particular site in order to fund the access to those ESR platforms. That is, as I said earlier, it's under investigation. We have an engineer and an architect working with us, but it is the early stages of that investigation, so there isn't anything to report back. There are existing planning controls on that site as well, and those planning controls allow for a development that is up to about 14 stories high.
Thanks, Claire. So Michael, just a question about the upgrade, and will it be built to a standard that would enable overstation development in the future?
So the bridge construction itself is being designed really for that low scale bridge height. In terms of the platform widths and what would be required for a multi-storey or a large scale bridge over or building over the top, you're talking very huge construction requirements that far exceed anything that would be required for a bridge structure. So at this point, it hasn't been designed for a large overstation development. It could be part of a more level access overstation development in the future as a floor plane that exists at roughly street level. But that is as far as the design has gone in terms of providing access for bridge and that level access across the corridor, not for future multi-storey development.
Michael, Little Everleigh Street has such a lovely vibe. Will there be additional landscaping, etc., to preserve its character? This person worries with such a large influx of people, the plants, etc., will be lost.
So as we are looking at the co-design process, it is to look at keeping a range of the current street trees that exist through the street itself, but converting, I guess, where the footpaths exist into the centre shared zone, and then looking at a range of landscaping opportunities and how that relates to both the Wilson Street closed section, the pocket park that's on Little Everleigh Street, and out to Lawson. So there will be a lot of opportunities in terms of street finishes, street furniture, landscaping that will be, I guess, developed in consultation with the community during the co-design process.
Will there be toilets in the Little Everleigh Street building?
So it is proposed to have a full suite of toilet facilities in the Little Everleigh Street building, including disabled access toilets, and there will be a disabled access toilet on the Marion Street entry as well.
And so there's a couple more questions about parking. With the loss of some parking spaces on Little Everleigh Street and those parking spaces be moved to the CFNSW land just off to the west, I'm wondering if there will be an expansion of the parking spaces to cover commuter parking, and along with the car share and accessible spots, will there be an electric vehicle charging spot? There was also one more question on parking, which was about whether it's going to be dedicated for residents, and will each resident have a specific car park each? So there's a few parking questions there.
So I guess just to confirm that the parking is an offset of the 20 and re-put into that new location under the current parking requirements, which is 2-hour parking limit, unless you are a local resident that has a permit. So it won't be an all-day parking, it won't be commuter parking. It is to offset that current parking configuration that exists in that location. Because of the density of Redfern Station, it is not encouraged that the park and ride exists significantly around the Redfern area. The streets are very congested, and we won't be looking at adding any commuter parking at this point in time that would add on to the current density of parking in the area. Obviously, as part of that North Everleigh development in the future, all different items can be considered at that point in terms of what that development actually exists. But at this point, no commuter parking, and also not dedicated for residents. It will be under the current 2-hour parking limitations that exist on the street currently.
Great. Thanks, Michael. That brings us to 2 o'clock. We still do have a number of questions still in the queue. As promised, we will provide responses to those questions and post them on our website. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined us today. We really appreciate it. And as I've mentioned, if you have any questions, any further questions that you'd like to ask the team, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Transport. And I'd encourage you all to go to the Department of Planning's website and their planning portal and provide your feedback on what's being proposed. So thanks very much.